1 o'clock UK time. I think we can make it started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Future of Customs and Global Trade, Next Generation Perspectives on Technology, Policy and Data. It's my extreme privilege to welcome our panelists and the founder of the Global Customs and Trade Forum. So as of today's agenda, we will do some quick introductions. What the Global Customs and Trade Forum is. I will introduce to you all of our panelists, and then I will open the floor to our panel discussion. We will go through the Global Customs Canon that Greg will take us through. Last but not least, we will go through the Q&A. Okay, just as of the above a housekeeping notes from my side, we keep the questions at the end, but yeah, if we happen to run out of time, please, by all means, do send us your questions. On the right-hand side, you've got the QR code, which will take you to the Global Customs and Trade Forum. So you can find the contact details there, and you can send your question. As of the event description, customs and global trade are entering a period of significant technological and regulatory change. Digital trade documents, data sharing frameworks, AI, which is currently a buzzword, digital payment system, and sustainability-related regulations are increasingly shaping how businesses and, of course, the border authorities manage international transactions. This panel will examine how these developments are changing trade processes, customs compliance, and access to international markets, including the implications for SMEs. So rather than considering emerging technologies in isolation, the discussion will explore how technology, regulation, data, and institutional cooperation must work together to support more efficient, secure, and inclusive global trade. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome all of the speakers. I will start with myself. I'm a new Director of Community Engagement at the Global Customs and Trade Forum, where outside of my full-time job as a Global Trade Technology Manager at Safran, I share my passion and customs on global trade, focusing on digitalization, trade facilitation, and of course, expanding my knowledge. And this is what I'm hoping to do today. I would like to move on to Greg Pilkington. Greg Pilkington is the founder of the Global Customs and Trade Forum, a curated global community of customs and trade professionals. He writes and speaks on the future of the profession, and AI-enabled compliance, risk-based enforcement, data standards, and digital trade facilitation, and leads the forum's agenda, including the Global Customs Canon, which we will discuss later on today, Global Customs and Trade Forum's reference framework for the Customs 4.0 area, which included a series of webinars, which I personally attended and inspired me to do more work around researching customs and trade digitalization and trade facilitation. As of the other panelists, we've got Jose Gonzalez, who is the co-founder of DocuShield Inc., a technology company digitizing bills of lading and other trade documents using blockchain, with the aim of removing the delays, fraud, exposure, and paperwork costs of international shipping. On the panel, Jose will explore what verifiable digital records could unlock for SMEs in international trade. Next, we've got Nisha Verma. Nisha is a marketing executive at the Consulate General of India in Manchester, UK, where she has been part of the team bringing together government, business, and academia around India and UK economic partnership. She holds an MSc from the University of Warwick, where her dissertation examined digitalization and trade competitiveness. Her panel focus will be on how emerging technologies are being reflected in trade policy and digital trade chapters of FTAs, which is something I'm so looking forward to explore more. Kevin Gandhi, next, is an international business development and account manager at Sandia Wholesale Limited, working across international sourcing and supplier markets. Kevin is also a graduate of the WMG University of Warwick MSc in International Trade Strategy and Operations. And on the panel today, Kevin will discuss the role of AI in international trade and share some key considerations when entering a new market. Next, we've got Maathangi Hariharan, is an India qualified lawyer working at the International Trade Center, where she advises on issues of customs, trade policy, and preferential market access. She holds a master's in international law from the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Geneva. And during the panel, she will discuss interaction between environmental regulation and customs, including WCO Green Customs Initiative and the increasing importance of supply chain data. Last but not least, we've got Adib Zuhdi, who is the market researcher and associate at Mark Plus Corp, which is one of the Southeast Asia's leading marketing research and consulting firms. And of course, the graduate of the WMG University of Warwick MSc in International Trade Strategy and Operations. Adib will discuss on association of Southeast Asian nations digital economy framework agreement with reflections to paperless customs and interoperability. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome all of our attendees and our panelists today. And I would like to invite Greg to talk us through the Global Customs and Trade Forum to talk about its history. Over to you, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. And I'm really excited. Sylvia has joined the Global Customs and Trade Forum as the Director of Community Engagement, and this is one of her first official acts, and I think she's hit a home run out of the park, assembled a team of some of the best and brightest and up-and-coming newcomers in global trade. So I'm really excited for this webinar. Thank you, Sylvia, and thank you to the speakers. Even before we get started, the Global Customs and Trade Forum actually was an activity I started when I was with the World Customs Organization in order to promote the events for the WCO, the technology conference and the PCARD conference and some of the other conferences. And over time, it just grew into this and have used it as a platform so that we can share ideas like this. It was founded with a simple premise that the customs and trade professionals rarely have a space that's genuinely curated. I'm sure many of you are in. There's a number of LinkedIn groups that have even hundreds of thousands of members. Unfortunately, there's a lot of spam that gets mixed in with that. At the GCTF, we try to moderate what does get posted and shared. I personally have hand selected, I think we're coming up on 11,000 members now, 10,800. And so there's no fake accounts that I know of. I mean, there's sophistication, but it is a relevant group and probably one of the largest customs and trade groups anywhere, not just on LinkedIn. That said, after nearly 15 years, it's grown into a community that's built around rigorous thinking on global trade is heading and not just where it's been. That question, where is it heading, has never felt more live than it does right now. And I think we're going to hear quite a bit about that today. We're watching digital trade records replace paper, AI reshape how compliance and enforcement decisions get made. Frameworks like CBAM push supply chain data from a back office concern to a board level. Individually, these are technical shifts. Together, they're structural change in how customs and trade actually function. Something Sylvia mentioned called the Customs 4.0 was a series of papers I wrote back in 2024, and then followed those up with some webinars with some experts in the field about the shift from customs as a paper-based transaction by transaction gatekeeper to a data-driven, risk-based, increasingly automated discipline. And I think the real change came in 2025 when the U.S. administration started talking about tariffs, because tariffs are driven by more data. You need an accurate HS code. You need duty rates. You need better descriptions. You need additional line item data like regulatory documentation for certificates, CITES, permits, license, quotas. We could go on and on. But the technology and policy shifts like this don't organize themselves. Right? They need coherent intellectual framework behind them, which is precisely why over the past period, I've been building what I call the global customs canon. And that comes from the fact that most of the messaging that I do between these applications is based on a canonical message. So the canon would be that thing that holds all of these canonical messages. And could be referred to as a structured body of reference work designed to give this field the kind of grounded, cumulative thinking that other disciplines take for granted. Think banking, think ICAO or IATA for airplanes. What if the airplanes didn't speak the same language? That could be a bad thing, right? When you flew to a new destination. We're going to talk a little bit more about that at the end of this. I'm excited to hear what our presenters have to say today. And for now, I just want to hand things back over to Sylvia, who I know is going to set the scene for today's discussion and bring in our excellent panel. So, Sylvia, over to you.
Thank you, Greg. As I did mention, this panel will examine how these developments are changing trade processes, customs compliance, and access to international markets. My first panelist is Jose Gonzalez. Jose, I would like to open with you, please. And I would like to ask you a question. What technology in customs or global trade excites you the most right now? And where do you think it could make a biggest practical differences?
Yeah, for sure. Sylwia and Greg, thank you guys so much for giving us the platform to speak up on our passions. But the technology that excites me the most is probably the least glamorous one you'll hear today. It is the digital trade documents that can actually carry ownership, specifically the electronic bill of lading. The bill of lading is the one document in global trade that behaves like cash. Whoever holds the original controls the cargo. And what makes this the perfect moment isn't just the technology on its own, it's that the law and the technology finally arrive at the same time, and neither one moves the needle without the other. Now, I want to be careful here because the majority of the industry was digitalized years ago. Your invoices, your packing list, your certificates of origin, those move around as PDFs and email attachments. And that was already taken care of years ago. But the bill of lading actually never made that jump. And it is worth understanding why, because the why is the whole point. A PDF is a picture of a document. For an invoice, that's completely fine because an invoice is a record of what was charged. But the bill of lading isn't a record, it is the thing itself. And whoever holds the one original controls the cargo, and you cannot represent that with a PDF because a PDF can be copied indefinitely, and who holds the single original is the entire legal function. Now, there's two things that changed, and they changed roughly at the same time. The first is the law. Trial's model law on electronic transferable records. TR gives an electronic document the same possession-based legal function as paper. The UK's Electronic Trade Document Act in 2023 was a big domino also because so much of the world trade runs on English law. Now, the second is the technology. And this is the one that I genuinely find interesting because the shift is a way of thinking of these documents at all and towards thinking of them as structured, verified data. The document you see is really just a rendering of that data. And once you make that shift, you can prove they are unique, untamperable originals. And that's exactly the layer DocuShield builds. We issue two kinds of these records: verifiable records, like invoices and certificates of origin, which are tamper-proof and issuer confirmed, and transferable records like the bill of lading, which can actually carry ownership and be held by one party at a single time. Now, there's also a knock-on effect worth naming. When a record is issued to these standards, verifiable, tamper-proof, with a single unambiguous holder, it becomes something a lender can actually assess and trust. A paper original sitting in a courier cannot be checked in real time, but a verified electronic record can. And that actually opens the door to working capital for the exporters who today often get overlooked. Now, I'll leave that to the trade finance side. But the point that I'm trying to make is that the document being trustworthy is what makes everything downstream of it being possible, including the financing.
Hey, thank you very much for your insights, Jose. I've got a question. When the counterparty receives one of these documents, how do they know it's real, and do they have to trust your platform to find out?
Yeah. So the short answer is no, and that's the entire reason we are built on open standards rather than a private system. What you're really receiving isn't a document. It's a package of signed, verified data that actually happens to render as a document. Because it's data and because it's signed, the person receiving it can check it themselves. You don't need an account with DocuShield, no logging into our platform, no trust in DocuShield at all. There's 3 checks and every one of them can be done by anyone without going through us or our permission. Now, the first is integrity. The data carries a cryptographic fingerprint. Change one character, one date, one number, and the fingerprint breaks. So you know what's in front of you is exactly what was issued. The second is issuer identity. The record points back to the issuer's own domain, not DocuShield's domain, so you can confirm it is coming from who it claims. And the third is status. You can confirm it's valid and hasn't been transferred or canceled to anybody else. And none of those 3 checks route through us. We aren't the referee standing in the middle saying, yes, this is real. The math is the referee. And this isn't a proprietary trick. Like I mentioned earlier, we follow the verification standards that are open standards. And the W3C verified credential framework just means that anyone can check the document against the issuer's own keys without going through us. Now, the point that matters here is the principle. You verify independently and you don't have to trust my platform to tell you it's real. So the moment verification depends on trusting the issuer's platform, you quietly recreated the paper problem in a digital form.
Hey, that's wonderful. Thank you ever so much, Jose, for sharing your wonderful insights and for introducing us to the DocuShield. For those of you who would be interested in exploring more, there is a QR code included by Jose on the right top corner. Feel free to scan it and visit the website. Thank you very much, Jose, once again. I would like to bring now our next panelist, Nisha Verma. Nisha, I do have a question now for you. How are new technologies being reflected in trade policy and free trade agreements, and which developments do you find the most interesting?
First of all, thank you for the introduction, Sylvia, and for giving me this opportunity to speak on this webinar. It means a lot. And now, talking about the emerging technologies in trade, I believe that digitalization has not just changed how businesses are working now, but they have also did a significant impact the design of trade policies and trade agreements. Like there is a strategic change in designing the trade policies and how the government or how the policymakers are now using the digitalizations to frame their agreements. Like one of the noticeable trend which we all can see and experience is the inclusion of trade digital trade provisions or a separate chapter of digital trade in our current free trade agreements. While the scope of provisions may vary across agreements or from country to country depending upon their circumstances and their own rules and regulations, but with digitalization provisions related to electronic transactions, electronic authentications, paperless trades, and customs corporations are increasing and which are significantly contributing to the overall improvement and efficiency in cross-border trade. And also, when I was doing my dissertation at the University of Warwick, I myself found that using the emerging technologies such as AI, blockchain in customs or in other procedures of the trade, uh, such provisions have significantly improved the overall trade structures in, if we talk about the domestic value added or the total import and export or the time and cost included in the custom procedures. They all have improved, they all have changed, reduced, I might say, the cost and the trade or the domestic values have improved considering all other factors as well. So I may say that because of such provisions, they seek to reduce the administrative burdens, improve the overall transparency, and facilitate more efficient cross-border trade. Secondly, we are also seeing that custom administration increasingly adopting the digital processes. Digitalization, maybe it's a process, but how to use it in a custom administration is a task. Like it needs some uh, more knowledge and more procedures to understand that how this technology we can involve in our process. So digitalization in customs has improved. It is included in different ways like electronic documentation or risk based custom management, as well as in countries are now launching single window systems for customs, such as TradeNet by Singapore or EU single window environment for customs, or if we say India has its own single window interface for facilitating trade. So such technologies are helping to facilitate faster custom clearances while maintaining the border security and compliance, which is one of the most important consideration. And another one of the most important development is the growing role of international organizations in including digitalizations in trade. Such organizations such as WTO, World Custom Organizations, or UniEscape are helping by establishing common principles for paperless trade and digital custom cooperation provisions, which give a base for many countries to trim or to write to make provisions according to their country, but they are getting a reference to, to have in a mind that okay, these are the common principles and which we can use in our agreements with with other countries bilaterally. So this is one of the most important development which, or the help which international organizations are doing for the countries. What I find particularly interesting is not just an individual technology, it's a process of digitalizations and of how digitalizations is shifting towards the digital trade ecosystem. I think it make more useful than a particular technology. So, yes.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. Here's another question. How can digital customs reforms ensure that businesses of all sizes, particularly SMEs, can benefit from digital trade?
Thank you for the question. I think it is one of the most important questions because now SMEs are playing a very big role in overall economic growth for all the countries. I think digital customs reforms have the potential to make international trade more accessible for all the size of businesses, specifically to SMEs as well. But yes, there should be some efforts that has to be made to make this happen. First is to increase the participation of SMEs in specifically in digital trade. Digital customs should be more simple, more transparent, and user friendly because SMEs have they have a limited financial and human resources compared to large firms, so they cannot afford a huge amount of resources or to understand the complexity of the digital custom administration. So yes, first there should be a simple and transparent custom procedures for them to understand. And second, awareness and capacity building is are equally important for SMEs. There the government should make some efforts to make a proper training or guidance for them, so that they should know how to use such platforms, digital platforms. And so because if they will get a proper knowledge, proper understanding, they will get build a confidence to use such platforms, and this will boost their confidence to, to use such platforms to be in a digital trade, because in future this technology will further improve. So SME has to come in the market to compete with the large companies. So these things, these awareness, these transparency will help them to visible in the market, in international market, of course. In the end, I want to say that digital customs are not only about adopting new technologies, but they are about to create an enable environment where businesses
Yeah.
of all sizes, like small or big, can participate in international trade more efficiently, more securely, and with greater confidence. Thank you.
Thank you very so much, Nisha, for sharing this. If anyone would be interested in Nisha's research, please do contact us after this presentation, and we will send you her her dissertation. And yes, I couldn't agree more on supporting the SMEs to a point on specifically providing the specific guidance on how to utilize their platforms by the governments. I think it's mega important. It's something I also included in my dissertation. So yeah, and yeah, SMEs must come to the market, which nicely brings me to the next speaker, Kevin Gandhi, who will talk us through the role of AI in international trade. So, Kevin, I've got a question for you. Could you please share your experiences on how AI is changing the way exporters make their decisions?
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much, Sylvia and Greg, for inviting and having me. So when people hear about the words AI, they usually think about automations, chatbots, or like replacing jobs. But as someone like working closely with the international trade and export side, I see AI very differently. So I don't think that AI's biggest contribution is automation. I believe that AI's biggest contribution is reducing uncertainty. So, like international trade has always been like about making decisions with incomplete information. Like every exporter asks questions like, which market should I enter? Like, which buyer can I trust? How should I price my products? Uh, what risk am I missing? And will my shipment arrive on time or not? So, for hundreds of years, we have answered these questions using the experiences of the previous people. But today we have AI, and that changes everything. So AI is becoming another employee in the international trade department, like not just another software, not another website, not another chatbot, a new team member. Let me explain. Like every exporter makes like five important decisions. AI is changing every one of them. Like first decision, like where should I sell it to? Many companies like still choose markets based on experiences and uh, or because someone introduced them to a buyer. So AI changes that completely. Like instead of guessing, like AI can compare like import demand, like the economic growth, competitor activities, all the free trade agreements, tariff rates, logistics, cost, and all those things. But instead of asking where can I export, now we can ask like where do I have the highest probability of success. This is much smarter question. Second decision exporters make, like where should I sell to? Uh, like finding buyers has become very easy, but finding the right buyers is still difficult. Like AI can analyze the company websites, financial information, then all the news reports, then shipping activities, customer reviews, and the business growth. But instead of giving us like hundreds and thousands of leads, AI can help us identify like buyers who are like most likely to become our long-term customers. Uh, that saves time and it reduces risk and it improves sales quality. Third decision is like how should I price my product? Many exporters still calculate pricing based on like selling price, which is cost plus the margins. But international trade has become like far more dynamic. Like the AI can consider like the freight changes, currency improvements, like movements, and competitor pricing, market demands, seasonal trends, and the payment terms. But instead of like one standard price, like AI can help us create the right price for the right customer at the right time. That improves the profitability. Fourth decision, which exporters make, which what risk am I missing? Um this is probably the most valuable use of AI. Like trade risks change every day, like because of the new sanctions, political conflicts, wars, the port congestion, natural disasters, or the exchange rates. But no human can monitor everything. AI becomes our early warning system. It tells us what changed before the problem reaches us. I always say that AI does not eliminate risk. It gives us more time to respond to the risk. Um, Fifth decision, what should happen next. This is where I believe the future is heading. Like today, AI helps us write emails. Tomorrow, AI will complete the workflows. Like imagine receiving and export inquiry. Instead of simply writing reply, uh, AI can like check inventory, review customer history, then suggest the HS codes, calculate the freight, prepare quotations, draft all the documents, shipping documents, and even schedule the follow-ups. The human like simply reviews and just approve it. This is what many experts call agentic AI. So not AI only answers questions, AI which completes the work. So as I would say that every major innovation in international trade has removed one barrier. Uh,
Yeah.
like containers reduce the transport cost, internet reduce the communication barriers. I believe AI reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty has always been like the biggest hidden cost in the international trade. The companies that succeed over the next 10 years will not be necessarily be the biggest exporters. They will be the fastest learners, and because in international trade best you can say better decisions always create better businesses. And as we are like right now conscious of time, I will leave my remarks here, and Sylvia.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I think just before you go, Kevin, I would like to ask what sort of skills do you think every next gen every international trade professional should develop in the age of AI?
um Many people will expect me to say the prompt engineering, but I disagree. The most important skill is judgment. AI can generate information in seconds, but it cannot understand every customer relationship. It cannot understand every culture. It cannot understand every commercial negotiation. So trade professionals must learn to ask, like, does this recommendation fit my customer? Does it fit my strategy? Does it fit my business goals? Like before AI, knowledge created value, but today, knowledge is available to everyone. But the real value comes from deciding what information should be trusted and what action should be taken. This is why I believe the future trade professional will not compete with AI. They will supervise AI, and that human expertise even more valuable. That
Yeah, so
makes yeah.
yeah, so you still have that human in the loop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested, and this goes back to our previous conversation between me and you, actually, with regards to like also asking the right questions of the AI, and to get the
Yeah.
more enriched outcome as well. And particularly, what I'm interested in is what you've mentioned about the seasonal trends and how you can utilize the AI to that. Due to the research I'm doing alongside. Thank you ever so much. That was really
Thank you.
interesting. Thank you for your insights, Kevin.
Thank you so
Um,
much for having me. Yeah.
no problem. Thank you. So now I would like to move to Maathangi to talk about the interaction between environmental regulation and customs, including WCO Green Customs Initiative. So let me start with asking you, Maathangi, a question. How can traders, especially SMEs, navigate ever so evolving environmental requirements such as CBAM, deforestation rules, and what role does reliable supply chain data play?
Thanks, Sylvia, for the question and for the panel today. I must say I've been learning a lot from my panelists so far. And maybe to start responding to that question, I think a very good place would be to pick up on some of the elements that my previous co-panelist was talking about, particularly on market selection and identifying your buyers or sellers, and also pricing consideration and risks, right? And so one aspect of it is looking at the role of AI in all of that, but the other aspect is also looking at what regulation is doing in terms of affecting all of these elements.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're seeing increasingly with, say, the CBAM, which is just entered into its definitive phase starting this year, and the EUDR, which is going to come into force at the end of this year for large companies and mid next year for smaller and medium-sized companies is exactly this. It's affecting everything from, the market selection. Is what are the benefits of exporting now to the EU? What do I need to keep in mind when I export to the EU? How easy, or rather how difficult has it become? Right. And then who should I sell it to? Can I sell it to any importer? In the case of a CBAM, we have a big problem here because only an authorized CBAM declarant is someone who is allowed to import goods into the EU. Well, of course, the benefit of this is the benefit that the new simplification package has come up with is the de minimis flexibility, setting the floor at 50 tons and above, right? So if you're exporting goods where the carbon emissions are under 50 tons, you really sort of escape this requirement. But at the same time, the question is it a complete escape from this requirement? Because when you look back at the entire supply chain, then the question is throughout every part of it, where is the carbon emission actually happening, right? And that's the entire objective of the CBAM, to address this carbon leakage that is happening. And similarly with the EU deforestation regulation, in fact, I would say it goes a step further in even asking for very specific geolocation data. And the regulation allows for the operators to also draw out the exact map of where the production is actually taking place, where the raw materials are being sourced. Is it from deforested land or not? And so when you have these kind of considerations, right, this obviously affects the buyers in the European market, how easily they are accessible now because the requirements have increased in terms of the compliance. And when you sort of take a step back and break it down into the entire supply chain, then we also look at pricing consideration, right? So how is the CBAM price actually going to be distributed throughout the supply chain? Is it something that will now be the scope of discussions? What sort of contractual provisions are we going to be looking at in terms of revisions, right? What are the additional contractual liabilities we may be seeing? And then lastly, the risks as well. I think that was the fourth point that Kevin raised in his presentation, right? So some of the risks are, of course, quite obvious, that you can't export anymore to the EU if you export products, say, that contain more than 50 tons of carbon, or cumulatively so, or with deforestation products, whether it's the raw materials itself or the downstream products that contain components that are prohibited under the deforestation regulation. And so this is where supply chain data really becomes important, because this is the central element in all these regulations. And I'm focusing a little bit on CBAM and the EUDR because the CBAM's entered into its definitive phase. We have the discussion now on the carbon pricing and the verification, the onerous requirements around independent verification. And with the EUDR also set to operationalize very soon. But there's also the sustainability product regulation, which has the digital product passport requirement, the forced labor regulation, and of course, other regulations that we can expect the EU to discuss and pass in the coming years, right? And so the common requirement across all of these is the supply chain data. And this is where it becomes really important for businesses, right, and SMEs in particular, not only to become more and more familiar with the requirements, but also at an operational level, at a firm operational level, start harmonizing the teams that work on this, because CBAM is no longer a tax problem. It's no longer a customs problem. It's a sustainability, tax, customs, trade. It's all kinds of problems altogether, right? And it's also now meaning that you invest in creating, or at least upgrading your data systems to have something that is uniform, that can translate the data across different regulatory requirements. And so, yeah, I think what I would say is that the supply chain data is so important right now, because that's a trade compliance input. And that's going to be the competitive edge for exporters from outside the EU to navigate the EU market in the coming years.
And if I could just quickly add to that, it's super important to have these good supplier relationships to actually receive that data and trust that data, right? But moving from the trader or SME's perspective, Maathangi, what do you see as the role of customs authorities in responding to emerging sustainability regulations and contributing to the green transition?
I think the importance of customs has never been more pertinent than right now, because what we're seeing is with these regulations, right? So if you look at the CBAM, the EUDR, digital product passport, a lot of these focus on the products that are being exported and imported. They're focusing on things that say cannot be measured at the border, right? But then the burden of this measurement is falling at the border, right? And so we see really good initiatives by the World Customs Organization, right? Particularly on the Green Customs initiative, the Green Customs toolkit that they're also coming up with, where they're seeing how to respond to this as one part. But the other part that they're also working on, which I would say these regulations sort of have in their objective, but really don't discuss in its scope, is greening customs in itself, right? So if we're looking at carbon leakages in products, you also look at carbon leakages in transportation, you look at carbon leakages at the border, and if your custom systems are being upgraded, right, we're using more AI, we're using more data centers, and that also has an environmental cost. And so the World Customs Organization and their Green Customs Initiative, what they very nicely do is also have this three-pronged approach where they look at being, which is how do customs in all countries actually green their own operations a lot more, right? And then there's doing, how do you respond to the sustainability regulations that are coming up? It can be unilateral regulations, it can be bilateral agreements, or even plurilateral agreements, right? We see a lot of increasing trend in plurilateral agreements these days. And the last thing is also about innovating, where customs is actually trying to spearhead the entire discussion on innovating green practices and harmonizing that, right? So kind of taking best practices, say, from what Abu Dhabi is doing, what the US is doing, and offering that as ideas for other customs authorities that are interested in doing in greening their customs and looking for a right place to start. So I think the work that the World Customs Organization is doing to support greening, customs authorities has never been more important, and it's really sort of imperative to increase the awareness of that and see that as a toolkit to move consistently towards a greener environment. Thanks.
Hey, that's wonderful. Thank you ever so much, Maathangi, for your extremely knowledgeable insights. The link to these regulations will be is at the last slide of this PowerPoint presentation that we will be sharing with everybody. But yeah, talking about harmonization, interoperability, and paperless trade, I would like to bring to the floor our next speaker, Adib Zuhdi, who will be talking about the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, so in short, ASEAN, Digital Economy Framework Agreement. So, Adib, could you share with us some reflections on how trading blocs such as ASEAN are approaching paperless trade and interoperability?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sylvia, for having me. Okay, today I will speak about the ASEAN, the Southeast Asian region, and specifically about their Digital Economy Framework Agreement. So put this into context, Southeast Asia is currently at a massive digital turning point, powered by over 680 million consumers. ASEAN's digital market will reach $1 trillion organically and jump to $2 trillion by 2030 through the Digital Economy Framework Agreement. Why this DEFA is so urgent? Because legacy paper-based customs framework simply cannot keep up with 185 billion in cross-border e-commerce and a market where over 60% of payments are already digital. Traditional border friction creates costly delays, making a seamless digital-first regional agreement absolutely essential for sustained growth. So, What makes ASEAN strategy unique on this global stage? While traditional blocs spend decades trying to unify complex domestic law first, ASEAN takes a pragmatic digital-first approach by connecting technical infrastructure directly from day one. We see this active today through the regional payment connectivity, which directly links national fast payment systems and QR rails like Kris, Do It Now, and PromptPay. Live payment linkage such as Pay Now and to PromptPay have already proven to slash cross-border transfer costs from 30% down to under 3%, while cutting settlement times from days to mere minutes. However, achieving full digital integration comes with real-world hurdles. Navigating data sovereignty across 10 independent nations remains our single biggest operational challenge. With 4 member states enforcing strict data localization mandates, cross-border compliance friction remains high. Because ASEAN lacks a central court or regional parliament, compliance cannot be forced top-down. It relies entirely on flexible mutual recognition and consensus. So how do we solve this friction at physical borders? The answer lies in cross-border paperless trade. By automating customs risk screening and adopting electronic invoicing, we cut border clearance delays from days down to minutes. According to UN SCAP data, paperless trade delivers a 25% reduction in trade costs, unlocking 600 billion USD in annual saving across the region. Most importantly, these automated workflows directly lower compliance barriers for SMEs, which represent 97% of all ASEAN enterprise. Behind the scene, how do we bridge 10 distinct national platforms without forcing countries to rewrite their local laws? The technical backbone is API-driven interoperability aligned with World Customs Organization or WCO standards. Secure API layers will allow diverse national software systems to communicate seamlessly, delivering instant, predictable compliance for traders while fully respecting national sovereignty. I think that's all from my side today. Thank you, Sylwia.
Yeah, thank you ever so much. I'm personally feeling very passionate about the paperless trade, and that's a really important aspect to research. We would like to just quickly summarize the panelist discussion. And yeah, today's discussion has shown that the future of customs and global trade depends on technology, policy, reliable data, and international cooperation working together. From verifiable digital documents and AI to sustainability requirements and regional interoperability, these developments must remain practical, trusted, and inclusive, especially for the SMEs and less digitally advanced economies. Adib prepared another PowerPoint presentation on this topic as well. If anyone would be interested in receiving this PowerPoint presentation that Adib prepared for us, please do reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to share. As of the concluding remarks and to talk about the global customs canon, I would like to invite Greg now to the floor to discuss the global customs canon and talk us through some technical explainer to the canon, please. Greg, over to you.
First, I want to say, wow, you guys are incredible. I'm so impressed that we have such wisdom into where we're going. And I'm going to touch on some of those things, really from Jose's start with verifiable credentials, and in the Canon, I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. We talk a lot about verifiable credentials. There's the UN Transparency Protocol now that's being pushed by UNCFAC that is based off of these W3C verifiable credentials. I don't think there's a way around it. I think that the technology will be the future. But again, thank you, an incredible panel, Sylwia, for putting it together. To Nisha and Kevin, Maathangi, and Adib as well, thank you for contributing your perspectives. So what you heard in this past hour are 5 different entry points, right? We've talked about technology, we've talked about policy, sustainability regulation, regional frameworks, and where we're all converging on the same underlying question is how do we make global trade more efficient then, right? More secure and more inclusive. I heard SME, I don't know how many times. But it's important, right? That's where the jobs are. And even in the advanced economies, that's where the jobs are with the SMEs. We have to make sure that we bring everybody up in the rising tide. So the Canon was my attempt, and I probably should take a step back. I don't think I properly introduced myself because I have been around for a very long time, and I'm not going to spoil the show with 30 years of experience. But I'll start with when I got into this business, we were still taking stacks of paper and manually entering them in a green screen on an AS400. That was not fun at all. But it taught me a lot about what the data was and why they needed it and where it was and which document it comes from. And over these past 30 years and having worked for not just DHL, but FedEx and the World Customs Organization, I can tell you global standards are at best an aspiration, a worthy aspiration, but there is no such thing as a global standard, not when it comes to customs data. You could have the North American version of the global standard or the EU version of the global standard or the Asian version of the global standard. And where that becomes important for us is in AI, it's very true. We can take unstructured data and structure that data. I see it done every day. The problem is once you structure the data, does that structure match the structure where it needs to be presented and reconciled and used? And so the Canon is an attempt to, and these are not all original ideas. I took them from what I've learned across the 30 years, most of it coming from the WCO, and the Belgian Director of Customs, Noel Colpin, called it the SWIFT model, right? We do it one time. And so what was in today's world referred to as an export declaration, maybe a transit declaration, an import declaration, could be one knowledge graph. If we flip the current global trade transaction from document-based to database, right? And if we go with that, that means we have to have a much more specific, standardized, and harmonized ontology on how we call these things. Because that's, you know, the colleagues that I work with today, roughly 13,000 clearance professionals in every jurisdiction, almost 1 million shipments a day. I can tell you there's too much ambiguity, too much variability, and we need a standard to be able to work towards. And so that was where my thoughts came together on the Canon. And that really came out of, I see some folks on the call, Gabriella, Dominique, they were speakers in the webinar series back in 2024. We talk about Customs 4.0. And I work with a lot of architects and engineers on a daily basis. Look, the wall is there and it's very real. We can structure data, we can work through the processes. But at the end of the day, if we're going to have seamless global trade, we all have to agree on what that structure is. Now, the other thing is governments, and we have Nisha here to vouch for us, they don't move very quickly, and they're not really open to change. They like the laws that they have because that's what they've developed and that's what they want to stay with. But at the same time, we can share technology, right? We can agree on what data is important. So for example, if we all say that we want, you know, these 300 data elements from the WCO data model, and that data is present, then why do we need to present it more than one time, right? We presented it at export, we presented it at import, and we're done, right? I call that in the Canon the concept of a bilateral digital twin, right? So you take the knowledge graph is persistent, and whenever you need data from that graph, at a specific point in time, if it's wheels up, if it's the export date, if it's wheels down, or the import date, or the exchange rate, the date of the exchange rate for the currency, all of that can be sourced from one knowledge graph, right? And then you've reduced the effort on import and export operations. You can support reporting from one artifact, and that for customs administrations is probably the key, right? For the international organizations that support these customs administrations, we reduce effort, especially in the developing countries and least developing countries where they can afford that kind of customs operation. And we take away circumvention, because when we have one knowledge graph of the transaction, there can be no difference between what was declared as a value at export, between what was declared as a value at import. And when I say value, I don't mean just the currency, the description, the HS code, the unit of measure. All of those things are subject to change today because there is no reconciliation between jurisdictions. Right? So a Canon would also support that. So that was my little spiel. Again, I'm so excited. I'm looking forward. Hopefully we could do this again in the not too distant future. I know that we're going to get a lot of feedback in the LinkedIn community. And again, I just want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you, Sylvia, for moderating such a sharp discussion. Thanks. Anything you want to close us with?
Thank you ever so much, Greg, for these closing remarks and talking us through the Global Customs Canon. So I did include the link to the Canon itself. At the very first page of this PowerPoint presentation, you do have the QR code to the forum itself. Of course, we will make the presentation available to all of you. Yeah, last but not least, if anyone would like to get hold of Adib's PowerPoint presentation on the ASEAN Nisha's dissertation, feel free to reach out. We'll be more than happy to set it upon request. I don't think we have any questions in the chat, although we have one person, Alexei, who shared with us some great article for those who are interested in HS and circular economy. So the link is in the webinar chat, so hopefully you can all access it. Yeah, so last but not least, thank you very so much for attending. I'm definitely left with lots of notes, lots of thoughts. And I would like to thank all of our panelists and Greg for making this webinar possible. We are right on time, so have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Day.
Thanks, bye.